Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started.
Hey, John.
Hey, Lauren. I'm really looking forward to talking about our topic with you.
Me too. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It's a topic that I think we could talk about in every episode and still have things to talk about. Kind of like I could talk to you all day about it.
Yeah.
If we're, being cute about it. Our topic today is burnout. And there are so many aspects of burnout that we can talk about. So I think we're really just going to scratch the surface today, and that this is going to lead us to like a billion subtopics on this topic. But today we're just going to start by talking about burnout, what it is, why it happens, what you can start doing about it.
I think this topic is super important at this point in time because it has been a really rough 5 years. When I think about the last 5 years, I think about Trump and the Trump administration and everything that happened there. I think about COVID and the incredible impact it's had on our lives personally, but also on the world, on our culture, on our society, on our mental health and well-being. I think about systemic racism and our fight for racial justice. I think about the war in Ukraine, the barrage and the endless mass shootings that we've seen. And that is a lot. And, that collective trauma, I think, can add to burnout. I think it's not the only thing that happens. But I certainly have, over the last 2 years, definitely felt burnt out because there was just so much going on. And I didn't have the ability to be resilient with this constant barrage of one thing after the other on the sort of the societal and global scale, let alone the things that were happening in my life, at my job, in my relationships. And a lot of people are feeling this and experiencing this now and have over the past several years. And so I just, I think from the conversations I'm having with folks, this is a really prescient topic to be able to talk about.
And I think the last 5 or so years has been a pile-on top of the lives we had already built. And over the last 20 years or more, especially as I think Gen Xers and millennials, we have built this corporate culture that claims to be work hard, play hard, but is actually just work hard, work hard, work hard. And if you have a little bit of time off, play hard, but be thinking about working hard.
Exactly.
And so we started there. We started with working too much and too hard and having more jobs than we actually could do. And then Trump and COVID and war and just add on all of the unrest, racial unrest, women's rights, and we just keep piling on.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't in burnout before, something's breaking that barrier. Yeah. And I almost don't know anybody who hasn't experienced burnout. So as we start talking about this today, I want to start with the cause of burnout. And we're not doctors, we're not therapists, but you and I both have seen in our corporate lives, in our work lives, we have seen and experienced burnout in some really similar and some really different ways. So I'd love to hear your perspective on what you've seen cause burnout in your world and in the world of the people that you interact with.
Yeah, great question, Lauren. I have sort of two different perspectives on burnout. I think at a sort of macro, a bigger scale, burnout happens when our batteries are drained, when we don't have enough juice in our battery. And I like to think about batteries in our lives of we're expending energy, but we're also being sourced. We're also kind of juicing up the battery to be able to continue to thrive and to show up. And so in my life, burnout happens when I'm giving, going, working, focusing on everyone else, and never finding that space in my life, either in my daily life or in a week or a month, to be able to rejuvenate and get charged up, do those things that energize me, those things that are going to source me to be able to show up in the way I want to show up. And so when that juice is gone, that's when I really feel the effects of burnout. But I think the cause of burnout that I've seen in my own life is actually self-betrayal. When I don't maintain the boundaries that I said I'm going to maintain, when I people please, when I focus on what other people want instead of what I want, when I overcommit because I want people to like be essentially people pleasing, that's when I find really specifically I become burnt out, because I'm betraying the boundaries in my life that I know are going to keep me sourced. They're going to keep me in well-being. They're going to keep me healthy.
Can you explain, for those who haven't used the word sourced, what that means to you?
So when I talk about sourced, I mean, what are those things in my life that I'm able to like connect with, that are going to give me energy, that are going to be like revitalizing, rejuvenating, restorative, right? I think the things in my life that are those things are sleep, moving my body, exercise, connecting with people, having alone time, being out in nature, having fun. If those elements are not present in my life on a daily or every few day basis, my battery is going to drain and I am not going to be sourced. So when I talk about being sourced, I mean, what is that? What are those things? What are those points of entry that are rejuvenating, refreshing, reviving, energy producing?
So great. And I think that's something that people don't think about. They think like, I'm tired, I need to catch up on sleep. You know, you get all of these solutions in your head that are going to fix it. But if you're not constantly creating your sources that are going to revive, rejuvenate, make you feel rested, then you're going to lead yourself towards burnout for sure. Mm-hmm. I come from a little bit of a different perspective because I have always been a people pleaser. Mm-hmm. From the very start, I was here to make other people happy. That is why I thought I was put on this earth. What that did for me was that it gave me a ton of opportunities to participate in things that if I hadn't been a hand raiser, if I hadn't been a people pleaser, if I hadn't been looking for the problems and the solutions, I wouldn't be where I am today. But there was a point where there wasn't enough time for me and for anything else. So my causes of burnout were actually the same things that fueled me. And that got me really excited about work and really excited about professional development and growth and contribution, until I hit a wall, until I took on too much. And I don't know exactly what that threshold was because I wasn't paying attention to it. But it was like I hit this wall and all of a sudden I was no longer functional. I had caused myself this burnout by just continuing to pile on and not ever letting anything go.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point. You raised a bunch of points that I thought were really interesting. The first is, oftentimes when I think about like being sourced, there are things that serve us until they no longer serve us, right? Yes. People pleasing, working too hard, overcommitting, those things work for a while until they don't. And so the other thing you said that was really interesting was like, I didn't know what was sourcing me. I didn't know what was energizing me. And I think so many people are not connected with themselves and with their bodies and with their desires and their wants, that they just don't know. And so there's no focus in that. It's like, I'm going to people please, I'm going to overcommit, I'm going to say yes without intention. And then we find ourselves in these positions where we're burnt out. We don't know why. We don't know how to get out of it. We're in this perpetual cycle of people pleasing, or that's just the flavor, right? You
Right.
insert your own thing that causes burnout, whatever that might be. But I think the key is understanding at some point, and we'll talk about this probably in a little bit, understand what sources you. And being in touch with your body is so important to say, okay, this thing, it served me last year, it served me last week, and now it doesn't serve me anymore. And I need to be able to say, okay, I need to make a change. I need to make a choice to have a different experience.
This leads us right to our next topic, because in between making changes that serve us and having burnout, being in burnout, is recognizing it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you just said, sometimes it's hard to recognize because you're just doing what you've always done. You're just doing the things that have always fueled you and have always been good for you: the working, the contributing, the succeeding, the serving everybody for everything that has felt so good. So tell me what it feels like for you, or for people you work with or clients. What does it feel like when you're in burnout? How do you know?
Yeah. So I think in my experience, there are two really distinct experiences that I've had with burnout. The first is a physical manifestation of burnout, where I am just completely exhausted. I'm sort of so exhausted that I'm paralyzed. It feels like cement is moving through my body, that like when I walk, I'm just sort of just trying to make my way through mud. So I think physically is one way. And I remember I was working on the Obama campaign. I was in Pennsylvania. It was during the general election. I had not had a day off in 3 months, and we were working like 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day of the week. It was super intense. It was really stressful. I mean, it was incredibly invigorating and fun and exciting, but I had never done that before. I had never had a 3-month stint with 0 days off. And one day it was like at 6 o'clock and my body was just like, I cannot do this anymore. And the solution for me was to sleep for a day. And I felt great. You know, I was younger. I was a little more resilient in my body than I am now at 41. But physically, I think when people feel that in their bodies, just this extreme exhaustion and fatigue, I think for me and what I've talked to some of my clients, that's one way to exhibit burnout. The other, I think, is more of a mental cloud, kind of a cloudiness that happens. And in recent times, when I felt burnout at work, it's been more, I've been distracted or unengaged. I've had sort of like, I don't care, you know, it's kind of lack of investment in what I was doing or my work or my role. And so that kind of mental fogginess, or that experience mentally, is another way that I've seen burnout manifest both in my life and in my colleagues' lives or the clients that I'm working with. How about you?
When I personally have experienced burnout, it takes me a long time to realize I'm in it.
Yeah.
Partly because I'm a people pleaser, and that does work for me a lot of the time. The other part of it being that I live with chronic illness. So when you were talking about feeling like you're walking in cement, feeling like you're walking in the mud, I kind of feel like that all the time. And I do it anyway, because I don't want to live a life where I've given into my chronic illness. So there's a long-term fight in my body and in my brain about what is too much, what is burnout, is rest or sleep going to help me recover, and to what level. And the fight in our own minds is to just keep going. And for me, I was so scared that people were going to find out I was sick and that they wouldn't trust me with work. They would think, oh, let's not give this to Lauren. She probably can't handle it. And that wasn't true. It was the story I made up in my head, which we've talked about stories. So actually being in burnout was hard for me to recognize. So for me, it was less the physical stuff, because I already had the physical stuff on my plate. And it was more the mental stuff, the fog, the being in a place where no matter where I was thinking about something else I was responsible for.
Yeah.
So I'm at work and I'm thinking that I need to do something at home. I'm at home and trying to sit down and watch TV and thinking I should be working. I'm out with friends and thinking about coming home right after I'm out with them and not having a drink or not having too much fun or not staying out too late because I'm going to come home and open my computer again and start working again. And it's that lack of presence for me that's the real indicator that I'm in burnout. In fact, I had a specific situation that should have been a big warning sign for me, and I wasn't willing to look at it yet, where I left for work one morning at about 7 a.m., which is not my best time of day. It was a time when I was working 15, 16-hour days, 7 days a week before a big conference when I was interim managing another department again. And a couple of weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from the Department of Transportation with a ticket for passing a school bus, a stopped school bus. And my first thought was, this is a mistake. There's no way I would ever do that. It's so dangerous. And the ticket had photos of me and my car and my license plate at 7 o'clock in the morning, driving through a green light, but passing a stopped school bus. I'm so thankful there were no kids in that moment. There were no kids in the street. There were no kids getting on or off the bus, but it was stopped. Its stop sign was clearly out. And I should have recognized at that moment that I was in burnout, deeply in burnout, because for me to not pay attention to that was totally unlike me. But I just kept on until I was so deeply in burnout that I didn't care about anything anymore.
Right.
And that was the real wake-up call for me, because I care so deeply about my work and who I'm serving and how I'm serving and where my impact is, that when I hit the point that somebody asked me a question and my internal response was, I just don't care. That's when I knew that I had broken through something that put me into real burnout.
For type A, high achieving individuals, it's going to take a long time because we're like, just push through it. One more day, one more long day, one more week. I have to get this. And so like, I think that's something to really explore too, is like, yes, it's totally on the physical side, but mentally for type A, high achievers, C-suite individuals, like we don't want to recognize it because we think we're invincible or we're so focused on whatever it is we're doing that we don't have time for it.
We just keep going.
I think what's really interesting is for those of us who are in the C-suite, also high achieving, ambitious, hard charging type A's who don't want to take a minute to sort of recognize what's happening in our bodies or our experience, it could also take a really long time for folks to also recognize burnout in their lives. And every day and every week that goes by without us acknowledging it and addressing it, more and more consequences pile up in that experience. And so I'm really interested, what are the other consequences of burnout in our lives when we are experiencing burnout and not acknowledging it or taking steps to remedy that in our experience?
For me, there are a few things. One was the not caring anymore. That was a huge consequence for me because I am all heart. Besides being type A and high achieving, all of it comes from my heart. So if I was in a place where I didn't care anymore, if I'm in a place where I can't be present and I can't focus on what my friends are doing, and I can't take time out of my day to really be somewhere and make conscious decisions, that's when I'm starting to really be in burnout and see the consequences of it. What about you? What do you see as consequences for yourself when you're in burnout?
Just from a health and well-being perspective, the impact of that on my body, on my well-being, mental health, all of that, I think is one. But I think the thing that I think about as a leader and as a parent and as someone who really values connection in the people in my life, I'm just an asshole. When I'm burnt out, I'm just not a kind person. I'm short, focused on myself. I have nothing to give to people. And I think the consequences of that, especially for leaders, is really great. I mean, it takes a long time to build a good reputation and one interaction to ruin it. And so I think there are some really significant consequences in the leadership space, not just in the workplace, but also in our families, at home, and our friendships. If we are not well sourced, if we are not really focusing on that aspect of our lives, we really run the risk of showing up in a way that's going to undermine our ability to influence and lead and have a really positive impact in our organizations and our companies, in the world, and our families.
It really is all encompassing. It is our bodies, our brains, our hearts, our relationships with ourselves, with other people, our impact, and just our ability to really be in the world. With other people I've worked with friends, with clients, I've seen situations where people are so burned out, they can't get off the couch anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They legitimately cannot move anymore. The real key for people, I think, is to recognize burnout early enough that you aren't broken, that you don't have to be repaired, because that is really hard work. And I've gone through that. I know you've gone through some of that. We've talked a little bit about what causes burnout. We've talked a little bit about recognizing how it feels. But what do you do from here in order to start taking care of yourself, in order to find your well-being, in order to figure out what your way of working and living is so that you do not stay in burnout? What are some things you do?
Well, let me just take a quick step back and say how I am now working to prevent burnout. And you just kind of mentioned it, is being in tune with my body, creating space in my day to check in with myself. How am I feeling? How am I physically feeling? How am I doing emotionally, mentally? I think that's really important, particularly for leaders, that time and space on a regular basis. Maybe it's not every day. Maybe it's every other day, maybe it's once a week, but really being in touch with how we're showing up, who we are, how we're experiencing certain things, I think is so important in not only in living, but also in the burnout prevention space. So I'll just say that quickly. But to answer your question, I think there are two things that I do or I have done in the past when I have experienced burnout and when I talk to my clients about burnout. The first is making a choice. This is sort of, I think, fundamental. It's asking ourselves, what are we available for? What are the consequences of burnout in my life, in moving down this path and continuing on this trajectory? Is it worth it? And for some people, they say, oh, I can't get out of it. I can't stop doing it. Okay. If that's what you say, yes, that okay. But it's really making that choice. It's really being able to say, I can't do this anymore. I need to create a new agreement. I need to create a new boundary. There needs to be a change. I think that's number one. And the second is much more sort of practical, and it's the how. It's how does that look? What do you need? What is going to source you? Is it more sleep? Is it more time connecting with the people that you love? Is it changing your diet? Is it taking your vitamins? Is it going outside and going for a 5-minute walk every day or during lunch? Is it, when you think about your meeting schedule, is it creating some blocks of time so that you can step away from the computer? So Lauren, like that's kind of my experience. I'm really interested in yours.
I remember when I started working with my own coach and I told her my non-negotiable was the number of hours I worked, that her response was, if you say so. And she was right. It was a story that I had made up, that I had decided work was the thing I couldn't shift. The truth was, it was the thing I wasn't willing to shift. I didn't understand I could shift. So I think the first to do is really noticing, where are you deciding that there's rigidity? Where are you deciding that you have to do things a certain way? Now, I'm not going to like suggest that you just stop caring for your kids, right? There are some limitations. There are some things around you that have to be taken care of. You want to have a clean house. You want your kids to be healthy and well cared for. You want to be doing a good job at work. You want to be enjoying your downtime. When you start finding that you don't see any flexibility in how you handle any of those things, that's when you might be in burnout. When you're finding you can't be present, when you're finding that nothing seems flexible, recognizing that there probably are things that can be flexible.
I love this question or this response, like, if you say so, because in our minds, we have it so strongly that something has to be this way. And that question, if you say so, or that response rather of if you say so, is so confronting because it really makes us think about how and why we've been living our lives. I love it. And I love people saying that to me. And I love saying that to the people that I'm working with.
It made me furious.
Yes.
And then I thought, you're correct. I have decided this. And the reason I had decided it was because I didn't think it was flexible and I didn't know how to fix it. And if I don't know how to do something, I make an assumption it's not fixable. Mm-hmm. And that is a constant practice for me to ask myself, really? Can you really not change this? Is there really not another way? But it's a newer practice for me over the last several years because it's a conscious choice. And you talked a lot about choice. You start deciding you don't want to be this way anymore. You don't want to live this way anymore. And you get help. And whether that's a coach or a mentor or a friend or a partner or an accountability buddy, you need some support other than you just relying on yourself and getting angry at yourself if you're not doing the things you're trying to change. You need somebody else in your life to say, I'm here to support you. I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to help you think of ways to make things different. You're not in this life alone. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we feel like we are, especially if we're high achievers, especially if we're hard workers, and especially when we start getting to management, leadership, executive levels, the higher we go, the more we think we're responsible for everything. And so my big picture advice is don't do it alone. Get support, learn how to set boundaries and enforce them, learn how to make choices, and learn how to have fun. We forget. We get to this age or this stage and we just forget that we're allowed to have fun.
Yeah, I love that. Fun and play are one of my values in my life. And no matter what I'm doing, I want to be having fun. Mm-hmm. And I think it's also indicative when I am not having fun for extended periods of time, it is likely that I'm moving in the direction of burnout because I'm not sourcing that part of me that needs that experience, that needs to laugh. Oh my God, I love to laugh. Laughing is such good medicine, and to laugh with other people. It's often those of us who are high achievers who tend to get burnt out. We're the ones who don't ask for help. But that idea and that reality of needing people in our lives to support us in the good times and in the challenging times and in the burnout times, I think is so important for us to hear and to normalize that experience of needing people in our life.
John, I could talk to you all day about this.
Oh my God, so can I.
Believe it or not, we're at the end of the show.
No way.
I am 100% sure we'll come back to burnout. And for our community and our listeners and the people in conversation with us, if there's a topic related to burnout that you want to know more about, tell us. Send us an email at iCouldTalkToYouAllDay@gmail.com. Or if you're connected to one of us on LinkedIn, let us know in the DMs. But we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear more about. Thanks so much for joining us. John, always a pleasure to be with you. I love being in conversation with you.
Thanks, Lauren. And thanks to everyone who's listening.
We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. And join us next time for more Real Talk.